My name is Sophia Reynolds. I'm 28. At 7:22 on a Tuesday morning in March, I was standing in my parents' kitchen in Elmwood, Ohio, holding a rejection email on my phone. My 14th rejection in 4 months. When my mother walked in, poured herself a cup of coffee, looked at the expression on my face and said, "Well, maybe this is God telling you that you belong here." I stared at her. "Maple Ridge Hardware called back," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "They said the position was filled. Good jobs go fast." She shrugged and blew on her coffee. "Mom." I set the phone down on the counter very slowly. "I applied 2 days ago. They said the position was filled before I even submitted my application." The HR woman on the phone sounded nervous. She kept saying she was sorry. She said she was really, truly sorry. My mother looked up at me over the rim of her mug. Her eyes were perfectly calm. The kind of calm that lives on the other side of something decided. "People say sorry for all kinds of reasons, Sophia." She said someone had already called about me. My throat tightened. She said a former employer had called and left a message about my... I stopped. The word felt wrong in my mouth. It felt borrowed, like a costume that didn't fit. "About a criminal record." The kitchen went very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and went silent. My father appeared in the doorway in his robe. He was holding the newspaper, which he still got in print because he said screens gave him headaches. He looked at me, then at my mother, then back at me with the specific expression of a man who already knew exactly what conversation he'd just walked into. "You were eavesdropping," I said. "I was getting coffee," he said. "Dad." My hands were shaking now. I pressed them flat on the counter. "I don't have a criminal record. I have never been arrested. I have never been charged with anything. You both know that. So who is calling these places? Who is doing this?" "Sophia." My father's voice dropped into that register he used when he wanted to signal that the conversation was over. Low, final, like a door closing softly, but with a lock on the other side. "You're being paranoid." "I'm being..." I laughed, and it came out wrong, too high and too short. "I'm being paranoid? Dad, this is the 14th rejection. 14. I applied to the grocery store on Carlisle Avenue, the warehouse on Route 9, the hostess position at Bellini's, the... All places beneath you," my mother said. "I don't care if they're beneath me. I need to work. I need money. I have $214 left in my checking account, and the phone bill is due on Friday, and I have been trying..." "You're welcome to stay here," my father said. "We've never asked you to leave." "You've never let me leave," I said. And that was when it happened. That was the moment the temperature in the room changed, when my mother set her coffee mug down with a quiet, careful click and turned to face me fully, and her expression shifted from that practiced calm to something I can only describe as a closing, like a window shutting, like the last light going out in a house. "We have sacrificed everything for you," she said. Each word was its own complete sentence. Everything. "And this is how you speak to us. This is the gratitude." "Patricia." My father said her name like a warning. "No, Harold." She held up one hand. "No. She wants to stand in my kitchen and accuse me of something. Fine. Let her say it. Let her say it out loud, Sophia. Go ahead. Say exactly what you're accusing us of." My face burned. My pulse was in my teeth. I could feel the exact edges of every word I wanted to say pressing up against the inside of my mouth. And I could also feel, with equal clarity, exactly what would happen if I said them, the crying, the door slamming, my father's voice going from low to lower, the way the house would feel for the next 3 days, the way they would move around me like I was a piece of furniture that had been placed wrong. I had been here before. I had been here so many times. "Nothing," I said. "Never mind." My mother picked her mug back up. "That's what I thought." I went back to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I read the rejection email 3 more times. and the words didn't change, and the number in my bank account didn't change, and outside the window, Elmwood, Ohio, looked exactly the same as it always did. Flat and gray and permanent. The kind of town that felt less like a place you lived and more like a place that lived inside you. I was 28 years old, and I had $214 to my name, and I could not keep a job, and I did not yet understand why. That would come later. Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. I read every single one. Let me take you back 7 years to when I was 21, to a Sunday afternoon in September, at my grandmother Evelyn's house on Birchwood Lane. Everyone called her Evie. Her kitchen smelled like vanilla extract and old wood, and something underneath both of those things that I've never been able to name but would recognize anywhere. The specific warmth of a house that has been loved in for a long time. She was baking a lemon cake that afternoon, the kind with the thin glaze that cracked when you pressed your fork into it, and I was sitting at her kitchen table doing absolutely nothing useful, just watching her move around the room with that economy of motion that very competent people have, the way she never reached for something that wasn't exactly where she expected it to be. "You're watching me," she said without turning around. "You're interesting to watch," I said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. She was 74 that year, small and precise, with silver hair she kept in a knot at the back of her neck, and reading glasses she was always setting down in wrong places. She had grown up in eastern Ohio, the daughter of a coal miner, and she had put herself through bookkeeping school at night and built, over 40 years, a modest and completely self-sufficient life. She owned her house. She had savings. She had, as far as I could tell, never once asked anyone for anything she couldn't eventually get for herself. I loved her in the way you love a person who makes you believe that you could also, someday, be capable of something. She set the cake on the counter to cool and came and sat down across from me. She studied my face for a moment with those sharp gray eyes. "How's the job hunting?" she said. Not a question. A temperature check. "Slow," I said. "Your mother giving you trouble about it?" I looked down at the table. There was a coffee ring stain on the wood from a cup left there years ago. I traced the edge of it with my finger. "She has opinions," I said carefully. Evie was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her hands were small and dry and warm. "Sophia," she said, "I want you to listen to me. You are going to be fine. Do you understand me? Not someday. Not if things go right. You are going to be fine because you are exactly the kind of person who figures things out. You get that from my side." A pause. "Don't ever let anyone convince you that needing help is the same as being helpless. Those are not the same thing." "Okay," I said. "And if you ever need me—" She squeezed my hand once. "I will always find you, little star. No matter how far you've gone." I didn't know, sitting there with the smell of vanilla cake in the air and the September light coming through her kitchen window, that I would only have her for 4 more years. I didn't know that she was already, at that very moment, doing something to protect me that I wouldn't discover for another 7 years. I just knew that in her kitchen, on that afternoon, I felt like someone who was going to be okay. The rejections had started in earnest when I was 25. Before that, I had managed to hold a few things together. I'd bussed tables at Patty's Diner on Route 12 for about 8 months. It wasn't glamorous. It paid $11 an hour plus tips, but I was good at it. I was fast. I remembered which tables had kids who needed extra napkins and which regulars wanted their coffee refilled before they asked. My manager, a tired, kind woman named Denise, had told me twice that she was thinking about making me a shift lead. I never found out if she meant it. because one morning I came in for a Tuesday lunch shift, and Denise pulled me aside before I'd even put on my apron and said, in a voice carefully drained of accusation, that she'd received a call that morning from someone claiming to be a former employer of mine, and that this person had raised some concerns that the restaurant's insurance policy required her to take seriously, and that she was going to have to let me go. What concerns? I said. Denise wouldn't look at me directly. They mentioned a theft incident, she said. A previous position. I stood very still. I have never stolen anything in my life. Sophia. Denise, I need you to tell me who called. I need a name. She shook her head. They didn't leave one. I'm sorry, I really am. You've been great here. I wish I could. I'm sorry. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for 11 minutes. Then I went inside and told my parents what had happened, and my mother made a sound that was halfway between sympathy and something else, something I couldn't name then, and said, "The service industry is unstable anyway, sweetheart. You're better off." I thought it was bad luck. I thought it was a misunderstanding. I thought it was one call from one confused person, and I kept applying. Hardware store on Maple Ridge. Declined before interview. Sales associate at Elm Street Apparel. Offered interview. Ghosted the day before. Grocery cashier at Hendricks Market. Called back to say position was filled. 3 hours after I submitted my application. Warehouse associate at Carlisle Distribution. HR manager said she'd received information that precluded her from extending an offer. She wouldn't say more. Hostess at Bellini's Italian Kitchen. The manager had seemed genuinely apologetic. "Someone called us," she'd said. "I'm not supposed to say more than that. I'm sorry." 14 rejections over 4 months, then 17. Then, by the time I turned 27, 23. I started keeping a list. I wrote down every application, every contact name, every rejection, every vague apology, every time someone mentioned a call they'd received. I kept the list in a notes app on my phone, and then I started keeping a second copy in a spiral notebook I hid under the lining of my suitcase, because something, I don't know what, some instinct I couldn't explain yet, told me to keep things in 2 places. My bank account, meanwhile, had been sitting at almost zero for months. I had made deposits. I knew I had made deposits. Tips from the diner, a small amount from a neighbor who'd paid me to help sort and pack her late father's belongings. But when I logged into the account online, the deposits were followed within a day or two by withdrawals I hadn't made. $80 here, $240 there. The account was a joint account, opened when I was 17, and my parents were both on it. I tried to bring it up with my father. He looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "We've been covering household expenses, Sophia. You live here, you eat here, you use the electricity. It's not unreasonable." "Those were my tips," I said. "That was the only money I had." "Then get a better job," he said, and turned back to his newspaper. I stood in that doorway and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than anger. Something that felt like the moment right before a decision. I went to the DMV the following week to try to update my address on my driver's license. The clerk told me that to update my address, I'd need to bring my social security card or my birth certificate. I didn't have either. They were in the fireproof lockbox in my parents' bedroom closet, the one my father had always kept locked, and to which he had never given me the combination. When I asked my mother about it that evening, she said, "We keep those safe for you, honey. You'd only lose them." "I need them," I said, "for identification purposes." "For what?" "For—" I stopped, took a breath. "To update my license, to open a new bank account, to apply for jobs. Mom, I need my own documents." She looked at me with that expression, the closed window one. "When you have a stable address, we'll talk about it. I live here. This is my address." "A permanent address," she said. "Something that's yours." "It can't be mine if I can't get a job," I said. "And I can't get a job if—" Sophia. My father's voice from the living room. That single word, that door closing sound. I went back to my room. I opened my notebook. I wrote down the date and the conversation, word for word, as best as I could remember. I didn't know yet that I was building a case. I thought I was just trying to remember. And the shelter on Denison Street had a check-in time of 5 p.m. and a lights-out policy at 10:30. The cots were narrow and the fluorescent lights in the hallway never fully turned off, so the room always had a thin, gray brightness to it even at midnight. There were 18 women in my section. The woman in the cot next to mine was named Gloria, and she was 52, and she had a laugh that was completely incongruous with her situation. Enormous and sudden, the kind of laugh that startles you and then makes you want to laugh too. I had arrived there on a Wednesday in November. I had $67 in my wallet, cash I'd hidden in a coat pocket my parents didn't know about, and a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, my spiral notebook, my phone, and a charger. I had left at 6:14 in the morning while my parents were still asleep, because I had finally understood that no conversation was going to change what was happening and that the only move left was to move. My mother had not, in the 3 weeks since I'd left, called to ask where I was. My father had sent one text, 4 days after I'd left. It said, "When you're done with this episode, we'll be here." I screenshot it. I added it to my notebook. The shelter had a resource coordinator named Doreen, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and kept a plate of hard candy on her desk and treated every person who sat across from her with a specific, unhurried respect that I found, in those first weeks, almost unbearable in its kindness. She helped me start the process of obtaining replacement identity documents. A replacement Social Security card took 5 weeks. A certified copy of my birth certificate from the county took 3. A new state ID, I couldn't afford to replace the license yet, took another 2. In the meantime, I applied for jobs. I sat at the resource center's computer in 90-minute blocks, and I applied everywhere I could think of, and I kept my list. By the time I had my new state ID in hand, the rejection count was at 31. Doreen had noticed the pattern too. "These aren't normal rejection numbers," she told me one afternoon. She was frowning at the list I'd printed out for her. "And the language here: received information, unable to extend an offer at this time due to concerns. That's specific. That's not just position filled." "Someone is calling them," I said. "I think someone is calling them and telling them something about me that isn't true." "Do you know who?" I looked at her. She looked at me. "I have a guess," I said. She set down the list. She folded her hands on the desk. "There's an organization on 5th Street called the Elmwood Employment Justice Clinic. They do free consultations. I'd like you to make an appointment." The clinic was in a building that smelled like copy paper and old carpet. I went on a Thursday at 3 p.m. and sat in a plastic chair and waited for 20 minutes. And then a door opened and a woman appeared in the doorway who was not what I had expected. She was maybe 45, with short, natural hair and a burgundy blazer, and the kind of steady, considering gaze that you associate with people who have spent a long time listening carefully to things that are difficult to say. "Sophia Reynolds," she said. "Yes." "I'm Rachel Simmons. I'm an attorney. Come on in." I sat down across from her, and she asked me to walk her through everything, and so I did. I talked for 47 minutes. I had my notebook, I had my printed list, I had the screenshots. I laid everything on her desk in the order I'd organized it, and she looked at each item carefully, without rushing, without interrupting me except to ask precise, clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The pattern you've documented," she said, "is consistent with tortious interference with prospective employment. The false criminal record claim, repeated across multiple employers over an extended period, with apparent intent to prevent you from obtaining work. That's defamation per se in Ohio. The bank account withdrawals without your authorization, The withholding of your identity documents, those are separate issues but related. There may be criminal exposure there as well. My hands were flat on my thighs. I need to know if I can prove it, I said. I need to know if any of this is enough. Rachel Simmons looked at me over her desk. What you've brought me today is a solid foundation, she said. But I want to tell you something. I received a call last week, before you came in, from a PI named Laura Hayes. She said she'd been watching for a woman matching your description to walk through my door. She paused. She said your grandmother sent her. The room tilted slightly. My grandmother, I said, has been dead for 3 years. I know, said Rachel Simmons. She hired Ms. Hayes 10 years ago. Laura Hayes was 58 and drove a gray Honda and had the specific manner of a person who has spent decades watching things other people preferred not to see. She met me at a coffee shop on Harwick Avenue on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, ordered black coffee, and set a manila envelope on the table between us. Your grandmother hired me in 2014, she said. She had been concerned about your parents' behavior toward you since you were a teenager. She asked me to document anything I could observe regarding their interactions with your opportunities, employment, education, social, over 10 years. She nodded at the envelope. That's a summary. The full file is with Rachel Simmons now. 10 years, I said. She was very prepared, your grandmother. My coffee was getting cold. I wasn't drinking it. She never told me, I said. She didn't want to worry you before it was necessary. Laura wrapped both hands around her mug. She said you'd know when it was time. She said you'd walk through the right door. What's in the envelope? Copies of documented calls to 17 employers between 2021 and 2023, traceable to a phone registered to your parents' address on Clearwater Drive. Transcripts of 3 of those calls, obtained legally through employer cooperation. Evidence of the joint account withdrawals. $4,870 total, documented by transaction date. And a letter. She paused. She wrote it 8 years ago. She updated it once, a year before she died. She told me to give it to you when you found a lawyer. I picked up the envelope. It wasn't heavy. It felt almost nothing in my hands, which seemed wrong given what it apparently contained. She also, Laura said, established an irrevocable trust in your name, $340,000, set up through an attorney named Carl Whitfield at Whitfield and Associates on East Maple Street. Your parents have no access to it, no claim. It has been waiting for you to reach out. She met my eyes. She said to tell you she was sorry she couldn't be there, and she said to tell you that she found you. I put the envelope back down on the table. I covered it with both hands. I sat very still for a long moment, because if I didn't sit still, I was going to cry in the middle of a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, and I was not ready to do that yet. I will always find you, little star. The envelope sat on the narrow cot in my shelter room for 2 hours before I opened it. I had asked Gloria to give me some privacy, and she had. She'd taken herself off to the common room without a word, just patted my shoulder once as she passed, which I appreciated more than I could have explained. I sat cross-legged on the cot with the envelope in my lap, and the thin gray hallway light coming under the door, and I opened it. The PI documents I set aside. I'd look at those carefully later. What I lifted out first, almost against my will, was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, small and precise and very slightly right-slanting, the way it always was. I read it once, then I read it again. Then I folded it very carefully and held it against my chest for a moment. Then I unfolded it and read it a third time. Dear Sophia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Patricia is already doing what I always knew she would do, keeping you close in a way that looks like love and functions like a cage. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it while I was alive. I tried, more times than you know. Your mother doesn't hear reason, she hears control, and your father follows where she leads. Do you remember the Sunday afternoon you sat in my kitchen while I made lemon cake? You were 21. You traced that old coffee stain on my table with your finger, and you wouldn't quite meet my eyes when I asked about your mother. I knew then that things were already getting worse. I made some decisions that afternoon. The original trust documents are with attorney Carl Whitfield at Whitfield and Associates, 114 East Maple Street, Elmwood, Ohio, 44512. Tell his office you are Sophia Ann Reynolds, date of birth March 7, 1997. They will verify you and release the documents. The trust is irrevocable and entirely yours. $340,000, set aside over 22 years from my own savings and investments. Inside this envelope you will also find certified copies of the trust documents with your name as sole beneficiary, bank statements showing 18 withdrawals from your joint account totaling $4,870 made without your authorization, transcripts of 3 employer calls documented by P.I. Laura Hayes, a log of 37 documented contacts to employers made from your parents' registered phone number, a letter from Laura Hayes to Rachel Simmons establishing chain of custody for all evidence. Take this to Rachel. Do not show it to anyone else first. Not yet. Wait for the right moment. You'll know it when it comes. You are not what they've been calling you. You are not a burden, not unstable, not someone who needs to be managed. You are the most organized, perceptive, quietly determined person I have ever known, and I have known you since the day you were born. You get it from me. Don't let anyone take it from you. All my love, always. Your EVPS. I will always find you, little star. I sat on that cot for a long time after. The fluorescent light in the hallway buzzed faintly. Somewhere in the building, a door opened and closed. I could hear the faint sound of the television in the common room, some kind of game show with a cheerful, tinny audio track. I was not angry. I want to be precise about that, because people always expect the anger to come first. What I felt, sitting there in that room holding my grandmother's letter, was something closer to the feeling you get when a doctor finally names something that has been wrong with you for years. A terrible relief. Because the thing is real and documented, and it has edges, and things with edges can be addressed. I reached for my spiral notebook. I opened it to a fresh page. At the top I wrote, "Next steps." Rachel Simmons' office was in a brick building on the corner of 5th and Harwick. Her waiting room had 2 armchairs and a coffee table with law journals stacked very neatly on it, and a receptionist named Ben who was so consistently kind that after my 3rd visit, I started bringing him coffee from the place 2 doors down. Over the next 6 weeks, Rachel built the case. I helped. It turned out that my organizational instincts, the same ones I'd been using to maintain my notebook, were genuinely useful. Rachel told me once, near the end of those 6 weeks, that I had the best documentation she'd ever received from a non-attorney client. You kept everything in chronological order, she said, with timestamps and source identification. You even noted the emotional context of each encounter. She paused. Have you ever considered working in a legal setting? I hadn't, but I held on to that. The evidence package Rachel assembled was substantial. The 37 documented employer contacts from my parents' number, including 3 calls with employer-obtained transcripts in which a woman's voice, consistent in cadence and phrasing with my mother's, described a felony theft and fraud conviction that did not exist. The fabricated documents, 2 email attachments that had been forwarded by employers to Laura Hayes, which mimicked the letterhead of the Elmwood Police Department, but contained formatting inconsistencies that a forensic document examiner identified definitively as forgeries. The bank records, the testimony of Doreen from the shelter, who had formally documented my situation at intake, a statement from a woman at the Bellini's Italian kitchen who had retained the voicemail she'd received, Rachel also identified two incidents I hadn't known about. At some point during my time at the shelter, someone matching my mother's description had visited the front desk and told the staff that I was dangerously unstable and that sheltering me put other residents at risk. Doreen had documented this visit and declined to act on it. At least twice, someone had contacted the shelter using the title concerned social worker, a title that investigation revealed was fabricated. This is not a person who makes impulsive decisions, Rachel told me quietly. This is a pattern. This is a system. It has been running for years. I nodded. I already knew. The civil filing will be defamation per se, tortious interference with prospective employment, and financial control under Ohio's domestic abuse statute, she said. We file next week. I want to warn you. Once this becomes public record, your parents will likely find out before we want them to. People talk in a town this size. How public is the record? I asked. It's a civil complaint, she said. Anyone can read it. I thought about that. Okay, I said. Okay? File it, I said. Two things happened after Rachel filed. The first was that Michael Grant, the senior partner at Grant and Holloway on West Erie Street, called Rachel's office looking for a referral. He had a complex case with a significant amount of document organization required: timelines, cross-referencing of financial records, correspondence logs, and his previous assistant had left on short notice. Rachel mentioned that she knew someone with exceptional organizational skills who needed steady employment and had just obtained a temporary ID. Michael Grant asked for a meeting. I wore the one good blazer I owned, which I'd bought at a thrift store on Denison Street for $14, and I brought my evidence binders, the originals, not copies, as an example of my organizational methodology. Michael Grant looked at the binders for approximately 4 minutes without speaking. When can you start? He said. Monday, I said. He offered $16.50 an hour with benefits. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The second thing that happened was that my mother made a town council speech. I heard about it from Gloria, of all people, who had a cousin on the north side of Elmwood, who attended the monthly Elmwood Township Council meeting at the community center on March 19th as a matter of civic habit. Gloria's cousin texted her a photo of the standing room crowd, about 60 people crammed into the folding chairs and lining the back wall, along with a summary of what Patricia Reynolds had said from the public podium. Gloria showed me the texts in the common room at 8:47 that evening. My mother had stood at the podium for approximately 6 minutes. She had, according to the summary, referenced a frivolous lawsuit filed by her estranged daughter and asked the community to stand with her family against a vicious and dishonest attack. She had apparently cried. She had said that she and my father had sacrificed everything for their children, and that her daughter had repaid them by fabricating lies to a lawyer. The room, Gloria's cousin said, had been initially sympathetic. People in Elmwood had known Patricia Reynolds for 20 years. She was on the library board. She volunteered at the Methodist Church rummage sale. She was a recognizable, present figure in the way that people who never leave their hometown tend to become. I read the text summary twice. Then I set the phone down on the table and looked at the wall for a moment. What are you going to do? Gloria asked. Nothing tonight, I said. I'm going to go to sleep. She looked at me. Sophia. Tomorrow I'm going to call Rachel, I said, and I'm going to ask her something. I asked Rachel if we could attend the next town council meeting. It was scheduled for April 16th, 4 weeks away. Rachel thought about it for a moment, tapping her pen once on the legal pad in front of her. The complaint is public record, she said finally. We have every right to be there. We don't have to say anything inflammatory. We just have to say what's true. That's all I want to say, I said. She studied me. You understand your mother will likely speak again. I know. And your father may be there. I know. You'll have to hear things said about you in public, in front of people you may know, that are false. I've been hearing that for 3 years, I said. The difference is that this time I'll have the documents. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, once. Okay, she said. Then we go. In the 4 weeks between that conversation and the council meeting, I settled into my job at Grant and Holloway with something that surprised me with its intensity: genuine pleasure. Michael Grant had a case involving a contested estate with 17 years of financial records and 5 sets of correspondence between 4 different attorneys, and the previous assistant had made no attempt to organize any of it. It was, in the most literal sense, a complete mess. I spent the first 2 weeks building a master timeline, color-coded, cross-referenced by document type and date, with a separate index for discrepancies and a flag system for items requiring attorney review. Michael Grant came to my desk on the Thursday of the second week, looked at what I'd built, and said, in the low, considered tone of a man not given to hyperbole, "This is exceptional work." "Thank you," I said. "Where did you learn to do this?" I thought about my spiral notebook, about 3 years of documenting conversations and dates and phone call patterns in a notes app on my phone, about a grandmother who had for 10 years kept her own meticulous records because she understood that someday someone was going to need to read them. "I've had some practice," I said. On Tuesday, April 15th, the evening before the council meeting, I sat at the small desk in the room I was now renting from a landlady named Irene Moss, on the second floor of a house on Birchwood Lane, 4 blocks from my grandmother's old house, and I laid out everything I planned to bring the next day: the trust documents, a printed copy of Rachel's civil complaint, a 1-page summary I had prepared, clean, single-spaced, organized, of the core evidence, the letter. I brought the letter. I put everything in a folder. I closed the folder. I set it on the corner of the desk. Then I went to sleep at 10:15 p.m. and slept better than I had in months. The Elmwood Township Community Center is a single-story building on Alden Avenue with a parking lot in front and a flag on a pole out front that gets stuck sometimes when the wind is from the north. Inside, the main meeting room has rows of folding chairs facing a low dais with a long table for the council members, and at the front left, facing the room, a freestanding podium with a microphone. Rachel and I arrived at 6:45 p.m. for a 7 o'clock meeting. The room was already half full. By 6:55 it was full, and people were standing along the back wall. I counted 61, including the council members and the town clerk. I recognized faces: a woman who had taught my Sunday school class when I was 9, a man who had coached the middle school soccer team, the owner of the hardware store on Maple Ridge, whose posted position I had applied for and been rejected from in 40 minutes. I sat in the third row, center. Rachel sat next to me. I held my folder in my lap with both hands. My parents arrived at 6:58. My father first, then my mother, moving in the specific synchronized way of 2 people who have been married for 30 years and have decided, together, what kind of evening this is going to be. My mother was dressed carefully. She always dressed carefully for things she considered performances: a charcoal blazer, pearl earrings. She scanned the room as she came in, the way a person scans a room when they want to know who is watching them, and her eyes found me. She stopped walking for just a moment, 1/2 second of stillness. Then she walked on to the seats she'd clearly already chosen, on the left side toward the front, where the angle would let her see the podium and also let the room see her. My father did not look at me at all. The council meeting ran through its standard agenda items for the first 40 minutes. A road resurfacing proposal on the north side, an update on the library renovation budget, a zoning variance request for a property on Elm Creek Road. The public comment period opened at 7:42 p.m. My mother stood up at 7:44. She walked to the podium with the unhurried confidence of a person who has already performed this scene once and knows the blocking. She adjusted the microphone, it was slightly too high, and looked out at the room, and I watched 61 people arrange their faces into attentiveness. "I'm Patricia Reynolds," she said. "Most of you know me. I've lived in this community for 22 years. I've raised my family here, and I'm here tonight because I need your help." She paused. It was a good pause, practiced, waited. 4 weeks ago, I stood at this podium and I told you that my daughter had filed a lawsuit against our family. I told you it was frivolous and false, and I asked for your support. She looked down at the podium for a moment, then back up. "Since then, I've been told by people in this town, people I trust, that some of you have been reading the court documents. I want to address that directly." Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the edges of something underneath it. Not fear, not yet, but a kind of pressure. "Those documents are Sophia's version of events, her version, and I'm asking this community to stand with me and my husband because my own daughter is trying to destroy this family with a frivolous lawsuit, and we have done nothing, nothing, to deserve it." The room was quiet, attentive, leaning, just slightly, in her direction. "She has struggled," my mother continued. Her voice dropped into something warmer, something that sounded like grief. "We all know that. We've tried to support her. We've opened our home. We've given everything we had, and this," she shook her head. "This is what comes back to us." Someone near the back made a sound, soft, sympathetic. One of the council members, an older man with a white beard, was nodding slowly. My mother stepped back from the podium. Rachel leaned slightly toward me. Her voice was barely audible. "Your call," she said. I stood up. I picked up my folder. I walked to the podium. I adjusted the microphone back down. 61 people looked at me. I had rehearsed this, not in the sense of performing it. I wasn't going to perform anything. I had just thought, carefully, about what was true and what needed to be said, and I had arranged those things in order. "My name is Sophia Reynolds," I said. "I'm 28. I grew up in this town. A lot of you know me or know my parents. That's actually why I'm here, because this is a community, and I think communities deserve accurate information." My voice was steady. I noticed, from some calm, observing part of myself, that my hands had stopped shaking. "My attorney filed a civil complaint 6 weeks ago. It's public record. Anyone in this room can read it, and I'd encourage you to." I paused. "I'm not going to tell you what to think about it. I'm going to tell you a few facts, and then I'm going to sit down." I opened the folder. I lifted out the one-page summary. Over a period of 3 years, 37 calls and emails were made to employers where I had applied for work. These contacts originated from a phone number registered to my parents' address on Clearwater Drive. In these contacts, the person claimed I had a felony criminal record for theft and fraud. I do not have a criminal record of any kind. 3 of these calls were transcribed with employer cooperation and are part of the court record. I turned the page. During this same period, $4,870 was withdrawn from a joint bank account without my authorization. These withdrawals are documented by transaction records attached to the complaint. I was also, during this period, in possession of, or rather not in possession of, my own birth certificate and Social Security card, which were kept locked in my parents' home and were withheld when I requested them. I looked up. I obtained replacements through county and federal processes, which took approximately 12 weeks. The room was very quiet. "I lived in the Elmwood Women's Shelter on Denison Street for 4 months," I said. "Not because I was unstable, not because I was a danger to anyone, because I had no money and no documents and no employer who would hire me, and I couldn't figure out why until I had access to evidence that had been collected on my behalf by a private investigator hired by my grandmother, Evelyn Reynolds, 10 years before her death." I heard it then. A murmur, low and spreading, moving through the rows of folding chairs like a draft through a room. "My grandmother anticipated what was happening," I said. "She spent a decade documenting it and set up a trust to ensure I'd have resources when I found my way out. She left me a letter." I reached into the folder. I have it here. I did not read it aloud. I thought about it and decided not to because some things are private, and because the summary I'd given was enough. But I held it up so the room could see the cream stationery, the unmistakable, small, right slanting handwriting. Mrs. Delacroix, who had taught my Sunday school class, was in the fifth row. I watched her press one hand flat against her sternum. "I am not here for revenge," I said. "I don't need this room to be angry on my behalf. I just needed you to have accurate information, because my mother stood here 4 weeks ago and asked for your support based on a version of events that the court documents don't support." I closed the folder. "The documents are public record. They're available at the Elmwood County Courthouse. I would genuinely encourage anyone who is inclined to form an opinion about this situation to read them first." I stepped back from the podium. Rachel Simmons stood up. "I'm Rachel Simmons," she said simply, from where she stood by her chair. "I'm the attorney of record for Ms. Reynolds. Everything she has just described is in the filed complaint, with attached exhibits. If anyone has questions about accessing the public record, I'm happy to provide the case number." She paused. "That's all." She sat back down. And then, nothing dramatic, no gasp, no single moment where everything turned. Just the slow, quiet, unstoppable thing that happens when a room full of people silently revise their understanding of something. My father, across the room, had gone very still. He was looking at the surface of the folding table in front of him with the expression of a man who has been caught mid-step. My mother was still standing near her seat. I watched, from the corner of my eye, as the woman next to her, a neighbor from Clearwater Drive, someone who had been to our house for dinner, quietly shifted her chair a few inches away and turned her face forward. The council chairman cleared his throat. We'll move on to the next item." My mother sat down. I gathered my folder. I looked at Rachel. She gave me one small, precise nod. We walked out. I didn't look back. Not because I was making a statement about it, just because there was nothing I needed to see. Outside, in the parking lot, the April air was cold and smelled like wet pavement. I stopped walking for a moment and looked up. The sky was overcast, the kind of low, even gray that means rain is coming but hasn't started yet. Rachel stopped next to me. "You okay?" she said. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Yes. In the weeks that followed, things moved in the particular accelerated way that things move when they've been held still for too long. The civil case proceeded. My parents hired an attorney, a retirement-age man from Toledo who filed 2 motions that Rachel addressed in approximately 4 business days each. The evidence was, as she had said it would be, substantial. The documentation was meticulous. A forensic document examiner confirmed the fabricated police report attachments. The employer transcript stood. The PI's decade of records stood. In early June, my parents' attorney contacted Rachel with a settlement proposal. It was not a good settlement. It offered a monetary amount I won't specify here, required a non-disclosure agreement, and included a clause requiring me to issue a public retraction. Rachel read it carefully, set it down, and said, "This is their opening position. What's yours?" "No NDA," I said. "No retraction. And the financial terms need to be significantly different." "Agreed on all 3 points," she said. The second proposal was better. The third was acceptable. I consulted with Rachel for 3 more weeks before I signed. The terms remain confidential, but I can tell you that the trust my grandmother established meant I was not negotiating from desperation. That changes everything. The position you're in when you're not desperate. It changes your voice. It changes what you're willing to accept. My grandmother had understood that. It was, I think, the most important thing she gave me. My parents did not reach out to me directly at any point during the process. About a month after the council meeting, I heard through Doreen at the shelter that my mother had quietly resigned from the library board. I heard through Michael Grant, who, it turned out, knew everyone in Elmwood who was worth knowing, that my father had been asked to step back from a volunteer position with the Township Parks Committee. I didn't ask for these things to happen. They happen the way things happen when a community recalibrates around new information. I visited my grandmother's grave on a Saturday in May, 3 weeks after the council meeting. The cemetery on Riverside Road was quiet in the morning, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but is resting. Her headstone is simple, her name, her years, and the word beloved, which she had chosen herself and arranged in advance because she was that kind of person. I set down a small bunch of yellow flowers I'd bought at the market on Carlisle Avenue, the one that had rejected my application in 40 minutes, and I stood there for a while. "I found the door," I said. I walked through it. The April light came through the cemetery trees in long, slanted bars. A bird somewhere close by was making an ordinary, persistent sound. I stayed for a while longer. Then I walked back to my car and drove to work. It's been 8 months since the town council meeting, 7 months since the settlement was finalized. I still work at Grant and Holloway. Michael gave me a title review in February and bumped my rate to $19.75. I'm taking 2 online courses through the community college, paralegal studies, which it turns out I have a specific and genuine aptitude for. I have a small apartment on the second floor of Irene Moss's house on Birchwood Lane. It has 2 windows that face east and get the morning light, and a kitchen with slightly uneven cabinets that I've come to find endearing. I have a savings account. It is entirely mine. It has no other names on it. I have my birth certificate in a fireproof box that I own, and to which I have the only key. My mother has not contacted me. My father sent an email in January, 3 lines, formal, offering to talk when you're ready. I read it 3 times and then filed it in a folder I labeled pending, which is where I leave things I haven't decided about yet. Some mornings I make coffee and stand at my east-facing window and watch the light come up over the rooftops of Elmwood, Ohio, and I think about the specific cost of being believed by no one for a long time. Not the dramatic cost, not the shelter, not the empty bank account, though those were real. The quieter cost. The way you start to speak in smaller and smaller amounts, because you have learned that your words don't carry weight. The way you apologize preemptively. The way you stop expecting things to work out. The way you have to very deliberately, very patiently, relearn all of that. I'm still relearning some of it. I think I will be for a while. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. My grandmother never once told me what was happening. She never warned me. She never said, "I've hired someone to watch, I've set up a trust, I've been building a case for a decade." She just sat with me in her kitchen and made lemon cake and covered my hand with hers and told me I was going to be fine. I used to think about that and feel something complicated, grateful, and also a little hurt that she'd kept it from me. Now I think I understand. She didn't want me to live inside the truth of what was being done to me before I had the tools to do something about it. She was protecting the version of me that still believed things could work out. She was keeping me, as much as she could, intact. "I will always find you, little star." She did. If you're watching this and you've spent years being told by someone who loves you, or claims to, that your version of reality doesn't hold up, that your perceptions are wrong, that your needs are excessive, that your instincts are broken, I want you to write something down. One thing, one moment you've been told didn't happen the way you remember it. Write down what you remember, with the date and the details, and keep it somewhere that's yours. Not because you'll need it in court, not because you're building a case against someone, just because documentation is a form of self-respect. It says, "This happened. I was here. My version matters." You don't need anyone's permission to be the reliable narrator of your own life. Outside my window right now, it's a November morning, just starting to rain. Light, even, the kind of rain that doesn't hurry. The coffee I made is still hot, Down on Birchwood Lane, a neighbor's dog is doing its rounds of the yard, unhurried, checking the same spots it checks every morning. 3 years ago, I was sitting in a kitchen that didn't feel like mine, holding a rejection email on my phone, watching my mother pour her coffee like nothing was wrong. Now I'm watching rain come down from the warm side of the glass. There's a word for that, I think. Not happiness exactly. Quieter than that. More like the specific satisfaction of being on the right side of something. I'll take it. If you've ever had to document your own life just to prove it was real, type, "I kept records," in the comments. Or if you're still in the middle of it, if you haven't found your door yet, type, "I'm still walking." Both matter. Both are the same kind of brave. Check the description for more stories like this one. Thank you for being here.